Hi. So we're back for part 2 of fear. Now, this particular meditation was very long and had a question and answer time in it. So I'm not going to actually repeat that section word for word. I think I am going to put this as a podcast in the Mystic section of my website, howspiritworks.com. So if you want to hear the entire meditation, you can access it there as a podcast. But for the purpose of the videos, there was one theme that I wanted to express that they said, and I'm hoping I can paraphrase it correctly. It basically is that when you're doing the practice of superimposing a very positive memory or positive experience or positive visualization, when you have this imagined fear, and the imagined fear is not with you in your present, and that's how you know it's coming from the intellect and not from situations or conditions around you. Anyway, when you do this, to feel compassion for yourself. In other words, acknowledge that, yes, I have these fears. Yes, this is perhaps an imperfect or unwanted aspect of myself, but still to treat it as a progeny of the self, albeit imperfect. Like you would with an imperfect child, you wouldn't love that imperfect child any less. So if habitual fear is a pattern within us, to treat it with gentle, loving compassion. And so when we superimpose a visualization of positive thought, which, as I said, is going to change the chemical compound of our bodies. And that's why this can be effective over time to diminish the occurrence of the fear coming to mind or even coming into the emotions or having even a response in the physical body. It's best to do it with an attitude of self-compassion and not with, oh, I wish I wasn't feeling this fear, and oh, I'm so stupid for, like having this fear. So that was on a part, that was a message on a part of the meditation that I'm not going to repeat specifically, but now we are going to start up again with the channeled words. So here we go. So the source of fear, whether it's coming from the outside as in immediate harm to our physical body, or if it's internally driven, both are valid forms of fear. They're not invalid. They are both real. So to dismiss something that isn't immediately threatening us physically, but is a potential threat to us intellectually and emotionally because of our inability to confront it and not even know what to do about it, is still valid. So a real, immediate, tangible source of fear that would be external would be, say, to be in a burning building. A fear response would be very appropriate in order to adrenalize the body to the point where we could extricate ourselves from the situation, or to sustain one perhaps in the immediate healing that might be necessary should we be injured during the fire. That type of fear is a very valid response. That fear is the biological response that is ever present in our physical body. And of course, the fear of a perceived threat say from feeling fearful of something on the street, an enraged dog, the fear of an abusive parent, husband, child, someone in the family group. Those kinds of fears, while necessary to be identified and dealt with, are an external threat to the health and vitality of us. It is appropriate to feel fear. Say if somebody is driving near you on the road who is impaired, it is valid to feel fear of somebody through their own mental illness or neurosis, has the personality of someone who is willing to harm other people nearby them. So we need to sense that and not ignore that, and eliminate the external source of our fear by getting out of the abusive situation. That is when the fear is coming from an external source that is really valued to identify and then remove it, eliminate it, or remove ourselves from the situation of danger and or potential damage on whatever level, be it spiritual, emotional, or physical. So they're not saying that all fear is either from an externally driven circumstance or an internally driven circumstance. But they do need to make a distinction between these. One may be called valid and one may be called invalid. But one way of seeing whether a fear is from an external source is to measure it against a perception of your present. Is this a danger that is in our present time with us? Is the threat in your present with you? Is the fire burning right now? Is the abusive situation going on in our present time? I know somebody who experienced a fire in her childhood, and she, to this day, is deathly afraid of fire. She actually did save her family. She was 5 years old, and she was the only one who woke up and saw the fire. And so our fears can be related to an external circumstance or a memory of this. So the way for her to deal with that would be to superimpose over that memory some other unrelated positive memory. One of the big tests about how to deal with the fear is to identify it as seeing whether it is coming from an external source. Then the chemical and intellectual reaction in the physical body are valid and healthy to feel so, and not be suppressed or blocked, so that we can actually change these external circumstances. They're just a warning that if we are feeling fear from an external source, then this is something that should not be overlooked, but taken as a sign that something must change in our present condition or situation. We must take some action externally appropriate to the external source of the fear. Extricating ourselves or physically moving ourselves from this source of fear. Or in the case of a disease or illness, appropriating the proper technical aid, whether it's traditional or alternative medicine or body work, to mitigate the danger to our physical body. Getting help. These are very valid external activities that need to be applied when the threat is coming externally to us. And when we're feeling fear, in the case of a valid external condition, event, feeling the fear itself should not cause us more fear. It should just be an accepted part of the warning system. So these external fears are dealt with in an external way. The external fears that are in our present and able to be identified in our present as coming from an external source, even though the response is felt within. And it may be felt on an emotional or intellectual level and not on a physical level. So it has to be identified and eliminated in an external way. But unfortunately, the fears that people are prey to more often in our species are internal. And of course, the big test is to ask if the situation, condition, event, or person that is causing us fear is in our present with you. And so if you're afraid of heights and you're not in a high place in your present, this is a manufactured fear in the intellect. And it must be dealt with internally. With the internal perspective of thought substitution, which we've already described. So however valid the fear response may be in the physical mechanism, it is being triggered, if it's being triggered by something that is not in our present with us. It could be from the past, from a memory, or maybe something that you're worried about that might happen in the future, but it's not in the present with you. So it's dealt with in an internal stance, an internal way. The internally driven fear, again, must be accepted and embraced. So those are the two basic categories of fear that they've been describing. But I know we get into some fun stuff in this area of the tape. So we may use superstition or sacrifice to deal with either fear, which is to barter one situation or condition for another that is distressing us. They're just a means of avoiding, identifying, and accessing healing, whether it's internal or external.